In the 21st century, we live under rules-based international order, which means countries cannot conquer and annex the territories of other countries. That's why we have to send tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine in order to stop the madman Putin from advancing in Ukraine, because we have to stop this precedent. If we don't do that, then other countries will follow suit. This is what we have been told about the Russia-Ukraine war in the past few years. But when it comes to Israel, what does the mainstream media and the proponents of the rules-based international order do regarding the advances, the occupation, the annexation of the Israeli occupation forces of new territories in Syria after the fall of the Assad government? Israel has already occupied the highest hills inside Syria, in Al-Qunaytira region, and now Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that Israel demands Syria, under the rule of the CIA asset, basically, Abu Muhammad Jolani, to disarm 3 governorates in the southern part of Syria, namely Qunaytira, Dar'a, and Sueda. Why Netanyahu wants this? First, he wants to eliminate all the military posts. He wants to take away all the weapons from these regions so he can create another buffer zone inside Syria, after creating one buffer zone in the Golan Heights in 1967, and then advancing again a few months ago inside Syria and conquering more land in order to create another mini buffer zone. But now he wants at least 60 kilometers deep inside Syria as a new buffer zone. And this is just goes in line with the Greater Israel Project. Israel will not only disarm these regions, he will also conquer and annex them as soon as possible. And one more thing Israel is going to do is to open a corridor between the Golan Heights and the Sueda governorate, where in these both regions, Syrian Jews live in this region. So this is what's going to happen, and it is already happening. And all these champions of the rules-based international order, international law, regulations, sovereignty, we have to respect the sovereignty of Ukraine. They will say nothing about it, because the main reason for them to support the regime change in Syria was to allow Israel to advance inside Syria by planting and installing a CIA asset as Abu Muhammad Jolani in power in Damascus. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. This episode is going to be a little bit hard for me. I am going to be as objective as possible. This is about my country, Syria. And at the beginning of this stream, I have played a video which is going to be online tonight on my personal X account. So hello to you all. First of all, I'm watching the chat, the live chat. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in today. It is going to be a sad episode, but it is an important episode for us to understand what is happening now in Syria. If you followed my long streams after the fall of the Assad government, after the successful regime change in Syria, I've been already warning that this is going to happen. And it would be really great if there is someone who can dig into the old streams and find all the predictions that I have made, which are coming into realization now, about the Greater Israel Project, about the privatization of the Syrian infrastructure, about the political decentralization, the Turkification of the Sunnis, the Balkanization of the minorities, Israeli expansion without any resistance, and you will own nothing, and you will be happy. It seems that there is a small problem on the Rumble. Okay, there is a small problem on Rumble. I hope that the people can still see this stream. I'm going to just try to access again because on Rumble has stopped, but it is still live on YouTube. So if I can't do that, I will definitely restream it on YouTube. Anyways, so I've been talking about this and it is happening now in Syria. It seems that Jolani, who is a CIA asset according to the American officials, basically James Jeffrey, who was a special envoy of the US to Syria under both the Democrats and the Republicans, he was very honest about this case, and he said Jolani is an asset for our strategy in Idlib. And before that, we have Jake Sullivan saying Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria, and we have all the evidence that shows the United States, CIA, Pentagon, MIT, Qatari intelligence, Saudi intelligence, Israeli intelligence, and also some of the European intelligence apparatuses have armed, trained, and supported these Takfiri groups in Syria. So expecting anything different from Jolani would be very naive. But today I'm going to go one step further, actually, and I'm going to liken or compare between Abu Muhammad al-Jolani and a very famous Mossad operative or spy who infiltrated the ranks of Syria in the 60s. This was one of the most successful intelligence operations of the Mossad in the past, and they've been successful. Later, their operative was discovered and he was executed. And I'm going to basically draw parallels between Eli Cohen, who was an Israeli spy, and Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. And I'm going to argue and tell you that the operation of bringing Abu Muhammad al-Jolani to Damascus is more complicated, actually, than the bringing Eli Cohen into the Syrian power structures in the 60s. Do you guys know who is or who was Eli Cohen? Just out of curiosity, do you know who was Eli Cohen? For those who don't know, Eli Cohen was born basically in Egypt, in Alexandria, in 1924 to a Jewish Egyptian family. And later he moved to Israel and joined the Mossad. This was in the early 60s. He was tasked basically to infiltrate the Syrian government to gather critical intelligence that would aid Israel in the ongoing conflict with Syria. And this is one of the major stories that we've been told repeatedly in Syria, and I'm sure that the Israelis also know about it. And there is even a movie, I believe, about Eli Cohen on Netflix. Of course, they're trying to glorify him, but for us, he was a high-ranking Mossad operative which infiltrated the Syrian ranks and damaged the Syrian national security. So long story short, in 1961, guys, Eli Cohen, he changed his identity and claimed that his name is Kamel Amin Sabit. And he said that he is a wealthy Syrian businessman who returned to Syria after living in Argentina. So in order to establish this cover and to sell his story, a convincing story, Cohen spent several months actually in Argentina, where he established a network of Syrian expatriates and cultivated the persona of a patriotic Syrian eager to contribute to his homeland. He was fluent in Arabic, French, and Spanish, and he had a deep understanding of Arab culture because he was born in Egypt, and this has made him a very convincing figure. Now, he arrived to Damascus in 1962 and quickly integrated himself with Syria's political and military elites. So, ironically or funny enough, if you know anything about the blackmail operations of the former possible Mossad agent, Jeffrey Epstein, he did a similar thing in Syria, but before Jeffrey Epstein was even known to anyone. And he started hosting basically parties in Damascus in his home and inviting, of course, senior military, security, and political figures. And he piled these high-ranking officials with alcohol and subtly extracted valuable information from them. He was charming, generous, and he had this apparent loyalty to Syria, and this, of course, earned him the trust of key figures, including military officers and government officials. Now, Cohen's access to sensitive information was unprecedented in the history of Syria. He visited military installations, observed fortifications along the Golan Heights, and even toured strategic areas near the Israeli border. He relayed this intelligence later to Israel, of course, using covert communication methods, including coded messages transmitted via radio. And his report provided basically Israel with critical insights into Syrian military capabilities, including the locations of artillery positions, bunkers, and troop movements. One of the most significant contributions of Eli Cohen was his role in shaping Israel's strategy during the Six-Day War in 1967. Basically, he provided detailed information about Syrian defenses on the Golan Heights, which enabled Israel to capture the strategically vital plateau with relative ease. Additionally, Cohen reportedly suggested planting eucalyptus trees, this is a type of a tree, at Syrian military positions under the guise of providing shade for soldiers. So later, Israel used these trees as markers to target Syrian fortifications during the war. Cohen also infiltrated the highest levels of the Syrian government. He became close to back then President Amin al-Hafez, and even suggested candidates for key government positions, some of whom were sympathetic to Israel. So, I mean, his ability to influence Syrian politics and military strategy from within was unprecedented, in my opinion, back in the day. And despite this planning and undercover work, Cohen's luck eventually ran out. In 1964, Syrian counterintelligence grew suspicious of his activities, and they began monitoring his communications and discovered irregularities in his radio transmissions. And on January 24th, 1965, Cohen was caught in the act of sending a coded message to Israel. He was arrested, and his true identity was revealed. Now, when he was interrogated, the Syrian counterintelligence, according to the available data, couldn't extract valuable information from him, and Cohen refused to divulge any sensitive details. His trial, of course, was highly publicized in Syria, and he was convicted of espionage, and eventually he was executed in Al-Marje Square in Damascus on May 18, 1965. Of course, his execution was a grim spectacle, and the intention was to serve as a warning to others. Eli Cohen's body was not returned to Israel for many years, and his family campaigned tirelessly for the repatriation. Now, I did some research. I couldn't find many information if after the regime change they were able to locate his body, basically. But I have read some local reports indicate that Jolani's army have located the remnants of his body, and they have already given it back to Israel. Don't quote on this information from me, but this is what I read. We don't know much. Now, this is Cohen's history and story in Syria. I would see that under the current circumstances in Syria, that there is also another Eli Cohen in power. Back then, Eli Cohen couldn't become a president, couldn't become the chief of the army. He influenced some of the politics, internal and external, and he has given valuable information to Israel, of course, but he couldn't become the head of the state. In this current situation, we have another persona who was directly supported by the American intelligence agencies, especially the CIA, and also we have the Pentagon, was directly supported by the MIT of Turkey, his soldiers, Jolani's soldiers, when they were used to receive bullets in southern Syria, they used to go to Israel for medical treatment. They received cash from Israel, they received light weapons from Israel, and medical treatment. So I would argue that Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, or what they call him now, Ahmed al-Shara, has been and still is an intelligence asset, whether for the US or Turkey or Israel or all. And they wanted him to come to power in order to achieve the aspirations of these countries, namely Turkey and Israel. Now, in this case, when Abu Muhammad al-Jolani came to power in Damascus, he selected himself as a president, and he said, elections in 4 years. And I told you why he wants for these elections to be in 4 years, because during these 4 years, he will infiltrate every state institution. He will create basically a deep state for himself so that he can stay in power as long as possible. He will change the nature of the country. He will Islamize the country. Basically, he will Turkify the Sunnis. He will Balkanize the minorities. He will give up on the Golan Heights and give up on more territories to Israel. He will give the Kurds what they want in the east, basically federalization, and later open a corridor. I said, how many times I said this? He will open a corridor between, or he will allow for Israel to open a corridor between the Golan Heights, Sueda, where the Druze live, all the way to eastern Syria, to the eastern shore of the Euphrates, where the Syrian Democratic Forces or the Kurdish militias occupy under the protection of the American occupation forces. So just in line with what I told you this week, and this was only today, basically, Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel will not allow Syria's new army, they don't have a new army, but the new regime, basically, to enter the area south of Damascus. So imagine that Israel now can decide for Syria and say that no military force can be stationed in the south of Damascus. Basically, what Israel is telling to the Syrians that the buffer zone is not only in the Golan Heights, and it's not only in Quneitra, and it's not only in Daraa, but it goes all the way to the borders with Damascus, which means Israel will now establish a 60-kilometer long buffer zone inside Syrian territories under the watch of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. And in this case, Netanyahu says, take note, we will not allow the Jolani forces or HTS forces or the new Syrian army to enter the area south of Damascus. He says, we demand the complete demilitarization of southern Syria in the provinces of Quneitra, Daraa, and Sueda from the forces of the new regime. Likewise, he says, we will not tolerate any threat to the Druze community in southern Syria. And of course, ironically enough, there was no any complaint or response from the Jolani authorities. They didn't say anything about this, and they didn't complain. They didn't even send a letter to the UN, did nothing. In this case, the defense minister of Israel, Katz, he says that the Israeli forces will remain on the peak of Mount Hermon in southern Syria and in a buffer zone for an indefinite period of time to, quote, protect our communities and thwart any threat. Okay. He also said that the Israeli forces have built 2 posts on the mountain, on Mount Hermon, and another 7 in the buffer zone to ensure defense and offense against any challenge. So Israel basically built 9 military posts inside Syria after the fall of Assad and under the watch of the current regime, Jolani. And he says also, the defense minister, that Israel will strengthen ties with friendly populations in the region. He means the Druze and the Kurds. And they will try to protect the Druze. And this was something I told you at the beginning of the regime change. And I said, once the regime crumbles, and you give a power to an Islamist, chaotic, radical, terroristic group, eventually they will pose threat against the minorities. And once there is a threat against the minorities will ask for protection. And this is deliberate. Like Israel and the US creating problems for the minorities and then presenting them the solutions. How many times I said this and it is happening? And I'm not blaming the minorities, just don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming any Syrian in this case, but this is the mind games and the social games and the psychological games that the US and Israel are very professional at it. And they keep playing in the region these games and they keep fooling the people. So when I do such streams, I'm hopeful that more people would watch and more people would wake up and be aware that this threat against them is posed by the same people who are presenting them the solution for their own sake, not for your own sake, right? So I was reading an article in Israel Hayom, which is a very pro-Netanyahu regime. And if you go into the reasons why Netanyahu wants demilitarization of southern Syria, you will see that they are doing lots of hasbara about this case. And the first hasbara, they say, oh, we don't know if the HDS is going to be, passive about Israel. We can't trust their words. Probably in the future, they could attack us and this and that, They know that HDS doesn't have military power to attack anyone anyways, especially in Israel, against Israel. So this is the first hasbara that they do in Israel Hayom. And the second hasbara they do is they try to say, like, look, HTS is under the control of Erdogan. And Erdogan hates the Jews. And because he hates the Jews, at the end of the day, eventually he will use this HTS to attack Israel. So we have to be sure to curb this problem before it rises. And we can do that by creating a buffer zone. This is the second hasbara because Erdogan has not been an enemy of Israel, not in the past, not in the present, and he will not be in the future. Erdogan's Turkey is a member of NATO, and Erdogan's Turkey sends 40% of Israel's energy needs from Azerbaijan. Erdogan and Benjamin Netanyahu closely cooperated and coordinated in order to unleash the HTS terrorists on Syria and continue the regime change and achieve their goals and slice the cake. The operation, which started from Idlib and Aleppo and then moved to Damascus, this was a joint Turkish-Israeli operation. And there is Turkish-Israeli intelligence operation room in Syria. They cooperate and coordinate now the future and decide the future of Syria. Therefore, there is no animosity between Turkey's Erdogan and Israel. This is on the surface for the dumb people in the region. Every region has dumb people, including in the Middle East. For the low IQ people, for the dumb people, for the people who are sectarian, for the people who don't know anything about anything, this propaganda is directed for them. That somehow Turkey's Erdogan and Israel are enemies, because this gives lots of legitimacy and credibility and support for Erdogan in the Arab world. And this is what Israel wants, because at the end of the day, were it not for Erdogan's influence and leverage over the people in Syria now, the regime change would not have been possible. And Erdogan has played on this, let's say, controversy for quite a long time. And he presented himself as somehow a pro-Palestine figure. But under the table, he is cooperating with Israel and with the United States, with NATO. I've been saying this for a very long time, but still there are people believe that Erdogan is somehow an enemy of Israel. And then Israel Hayom finally comes and tells us the truth in one sentence, that Israel maintains civil relations with various communities in Sueda and in other places in Syria, and especially with the Druze population. For this reason, Netanyahu extended his protection over them. So this is the main reason why he's creating this buffer zone in Syria, because he wants to occupy, like, Golan Heights are gone basically forever. Now in Quneitra, Mount Hermon is gone forever. We have now areas in Al-Quneitra occupied by Israel, and they're advancing inside Daraa. And inside Daraa, they will occupy some parts of it and open a corridor to Asweda. And this is the map, basically, how is it going to look like, with one exception, basically, I will just show you. So in this map, as you can see, these green areas will be continued, like Jolani will continue occupying these areas, Aleppo, Idlib, Hama. I don't believe that Homs will be given to any minority. I think the city of Homs will be occupied by Jolani because there is the highway here. So you will see Damascus, Homs, Hama, Idlib, and Aleppo in the hands of Jolani, these areas. And then you will see in Latakia and Tartus and in the Christian Valley here in the suburbs of Homs in the hands of the minorities. Then Israel already, of course, occupies the Golan Heights, then Quneitra. They will extend their occupation to Daraa here, and they will open this corridor here. This is the Sweda. Sweda is overwhelmingly populated by the Druze. And in the Golan Heights here, where Israel occupies, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving here, it is overwhelmingly populated by the Syrian Druze. So he will open a corridor between the Golan Heights, Daraa, and Asweda. And later, because as I explained in previous streams, why the American occupation forces have been stationed for over a decade in Al-Tanf border crossing here, basically. And I told you because of one of the reasons for the Greater Israel Project, because they wanted to secure this corridor between Daraa, Sweda, to the east of Syria, where the Kurds are. So they will open a region like this between Daraa, Sweda, and eastern Syria, and they will give an open access for these forces of the Kurds and the Druze in this area to have an open connection with Israel. And according to this, I think this is a Greek Levantine or page, he says, Syrian jihadist regime supporters are fuming after recent developments and claim this is David's corridor, the plan to partition Syria. So this is what is called basically David's corridor. This is the corridor. I believe that this is with the destruction of the Syrian army, there is no local force basically who can foil this project, right? With the exception, there is only one mistake, I believe, in this map. Homs is not going to be in the hands of the minorities, but Latakia, Tartus, and the Christian Valley here definitely is going to be in the hands. So this is basically the balkanization of Syria in front of our eyes happening now in Syria. And there is someone, which I believe he is Mossad intelligence asset, who keeps posting on my X account. His name is Yoav Fisher. He lives in Israel, and he claims like he is supporting peace between Arabic countries, etc. He tells me like, no, he calls me George because he even knows that my name Kevork means George. He says Jolani doesn't give land to Israel. He simply looks on and does nothing because there is nothing, absolutely nothing he can do, while Israel is advancing its interests and the interests of the Jews. At least he's honest, because this is the interest of the Israelis and some of the Jews, of course. He says this is a good thing. More people in what used to be called Syria on the map are going to get stability, prosperity, top-notch infrastructure, protection, and dignity free of political or religious persecution. So I would argue and say, when Mossad operatives and assets tell you their real agenda, you better listen to them, because they're not basically lying to us. This is plain and simple the Greater Israel Project. He's telling us to our faces. So some people have been asking like about the Greater Israel Project and the map. I think most of you know already. Just to show you quickly, like if you want to know what it's going to look like, this is how the Greater Israel could look like, right? This is the map. I mean, it even includes territories in Jordan, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, and in Egypt. Unfortunately speaking, there is something very important here just to mention. Like if Israel succeeds to create a 60-kilometer deep buffer zone inside Syria, all the way to Damascus, basically, this was the same approach of Israel in the 60s when they occupied the Golan Heights. And they said, we will keep the Golan Heights as long as there is a threat against us. And we will bargain it later if there is a peace agreement. But with Israel, you know that there is not going to be a sustainable peace or agreement that they could respect. So what is going to happen is if Israel occupies these territories and creates the alleged buffer zone, in a decade or two, they will say now there's a threat coming from Damascus, right? If there is a threat, alleged threat coming against Israel from Quneitra or Daraa, and they occupy it now, what makes you think that in a decade or two, they would say, well, okay, now the threat is coming from Damascus against Daraa, which is now our territory. So they're just expanding and extending their borders inside your country and then creating this so-called buffer zone. And then because the borders have extended and stretched, now the enemy, their alleged enemy, is on the other side of the buffer zone. And now they claim, oh, but the enemy is still there, or there is still a threat. And even if there is no threat, they can create a threat and say Damascus is now a threat to the national security of Israel, and we have to create a buffer zone inside Damascus. So demilitarization of Damascus, then demilitarization of Homs, then demilitarization of Aleppo, and then Syria is gone. Maybe I'm laughing now, but it's very sad. And it makes me sad because I know these things. And if you ask 24 million Syrians, if you're a Syrian, please let me know how many people do you think in Syria know these things? How many? 10,000 people? You're optimistic, 20,000 people. How many people know about these things in Syria so that they would be ready and immune against the expansion of Israel? I will show you a video which is claimed to be Israeli basically tanks inside Syrian territories already. They are moving in Daraa. I'm not sure, but this is what I received. They claim that those are Israeli vehicles and tanks basically entering the Syrian territories. There is a Druze flag and the Israeli flag, and they're now freely moving inside Syrian territories in Daraa and in Quneitra and in other places without any resistance from the Jolani gangs. This is not a rainbow flag, my friend. This is the flag of the what they call the Muwahhidin al-Druze. So, yeah. Now, during this time, we have people which I have all the right to criticize because they're, first of all, they're public figures and they're known to the people of those who support Palestine, basically. And they have been so wrong on Syria, and they continue to be wrong. And their opinion matters because their opinion is basically shaping the opinion of many people who follow their work, right? And this is with full respect to the person, but we have to criticize the ideas. So we have the propaganda and co. I say that it's a hopeless case with him when it comes to Syria. Many people like him are so blinded on Syria, and he is basically daydreaming. And he says, daydream with me. HDS, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis open a forefront harassment of Israel. The Syrians attacked the IDF in the Golan, with Uyghur and Uzbeks leading the Sunni charge. Ahmed al-Shara personally beheads the IDF commander occupying Syria. What the fuck is this? The Houthis rain hypersonics from the south, and their men reinforce Hezbollah's ranks in the south of Lebanon. Hezbollah rains down their rockets and empties the north of settlers again. Invading IDF soldiers and their ranks and their tanks are picked off by the Shia, make it a world war, a blasting on a Houthi GBL speaker the entire time. And Hamas gives the IDF hell in Gaza again, sending them back to Tel Aviv in body bags. Uninterested in seeing Syria fall to the IDF, Qatar increases their diplomatic pressure and Turkey cuts off the oil and gas flow from Azerbaijan. The Israeli economy goes into free fall. Worries about the Sinai, the Egyptians prepare their troops to repel any Israeli attempt to ethnically cleanse Gaza. The Saudis, unable to ignore public opinion after more Israeli crimes, completely cancel all normalization talks and demand a Palestinian state before any discussions can ever be restarted. The Jordanian people finally rise up and block the trade tracks entering Israel. King Abdullah is forced to pause his daily photo shoot and has to choose between firing on his people or closing the border and denying the track access. He closes the border. Iran, emboldened, finally delivers through Promise 3 their hypersonics pummel Israeli bases and airfields again. This time they destroy F-35s. Spooked, masses of Zionist settlers get on planes and head back to Poland, Germany, France, and Brooklyn. With global trade affected and distracting the White House from their other agendas, Trump is forced to negotiate a ceasefire. Israel withdraws fully from Syria, Gaza, and the West Bank. Zach, our friend, says HTS is more likely to team up with Israel against Hezbollah as they have done in the past. Scott Ritter is correct on this. He says there are no more Syrians. Syria died with the fall of Assad. Syria was once part of the axis of resistance. No more. Syria is HTS, and HTS is Al-Qaeda. Why would the axis of resistance side with Al-Qaeda? You cheered when their ally Assad fell, and now you are paying the price. Thank you, Scott, for this commentary, and I think he deserves this commentary. These people are, I'm so disappointed. And I would argue that there has been deep sectarian racism by many people who support HTS because they just hate the Shias and they hate the Alawites. There is also the indoctrination and brainwashing of Al Jazeera. And you have many NATO-approved imams in the region who have been brainwashing the people for decades, and this is the result. However, we have people who are very awake. I'm very happy to see also awake people. For example, one of the examples is Khalid Al-Sibawi, and she shared a brilliant story here, which I wanted to share with you. She says, I have respectfully let my Syrian cousins work out their issues amongst themselves and have refrained from commenting and even held my tongue when a few Syrians have felt the need to talk down to Palestinians and say disrespectful things directly to people in Gaza who have lived through the genocide. But as patient as I have tried to be, I have reached my limit. Dear Syrians, sometimes when you kinfolk are walking face first into burning flames like they are in some kind of hypnosis, you need to grab them and give them a little shake. Do not walk into the flames. Wake up. 1. Palestinians have been fighting the last 75 years. Stop saying you are tired of wars and just want to rest. What are you, British? Where is that fiery Arab blood? Your so-called revolutionary leader is giving away your land to Israel. Wake up, people. He is obviously a Western plant. How much more obvious can it be? Be real with yourself and stop making excuses. 3. When was the last time a country gave Israel their land and then were able to come back later and fight to win it back? Stop kidding yourself. What are you going to tell your grandkids you did in this moment when they ask you why they are now in concentration camps in Greater Israel? If your family has been wiped off of the register completely during the Syrian genocide, that is, stop making tired excuses for your leader. 80 years old Palestinian woman Women refused to leave their land in northern Gaza. They were starved, shot at, bombed, and they stayed. You're going to just let your new leader give away your land to the entity because you are tired? You are better than this. Signed by a Palestinian in the diaspora. I'm so happy to read the Palestinian woman writing this, and I was very disappointed to see many Palestinians, including some of the talking heads on YouTube, who were celebrating the takeover of a CIA asset of Syria. It's very disappointing, and sometimes I lose my temper as well. I'm a human being at the end of the day, and at some point I lose my patience. I am no longer able to communicate with these people respectfully. I mean, things are very clear and sometimes in a very blatant way, and it takes so much energy, to be honest, for someone who has been living this war for quite a long time. From 2011, half of my life I've been through this, and it's been almost 14 years I'm trying to speak up and educate people, and it's been 14 years of publishing documents and doing interviews, and it's not like I'm the one who is going to change everyone's opinion, but there are so many people who watch my content and they still repeat these CIA talking points. Basically, it's so tiring, and at the end of the day, I'm a human, and to be honest, I'm very pessimistic about what's happening in the region, and I think the region is I'm used to be very honest with you, and I don't want to make any wishful thinking or wishful statements to you. I think that the events in the past 1 year have been worse for the people of the region than what happened in the Six-Day War in 1967 war. So I think that Israel emerged victorious in at least Syria completely. And I think that Hezbollah will never be defeated, because to defeat Hezbollah, you need to kill all the people, the Shia people in Lebanon, basically, and kill their ideology and their religion and everything. So that's not going to happen. But Hezbollah has been localized, and they have agreed to decouple the front lines of Lebanon from the front lines of Gaza. Their leadership has been assassinated completely, and there was the funeral yesterday. I'm sure most of you have watched. This person for Hezbollah and the people of Hezbollah and beyond Hezbollah, Nasrallah has not been a symbol for Hezbollah alone. He was a symbol for the people who believe in a revolutionary or armed struggle approach in Lebanon, Syria, in the region, and to Latin America and all around the world. So he transcended, his support transcended the religion and sect and nationality. And I believe that history, the short, let's say, future, or the seen future, is not going to bring someone like Nasrallah. Like when Jamal Abdel Nasser died, Egypt couldn't witness someone like Jamal Abdel Nasser. When Hafez al-Assad died, history didn't bring someone like Hafez al-Assad. When Gaddafi died, you don't have someone like Gaddafi. And I think this is the case with Hezbollah, which is going to definitely impact its strength and power and regional status in a negative way. And I will even go one step further and say when Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated, his successor, Hisham Safiyuddin, was a very charismatic, and he was very also strategic mind. And he had a strategic mind, and he was the partner of Nasrallah, and they have grew up together. So he could have been a replacement for him. But he was also assassinated shortly after Nasrallah was assassinated. And then the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sheikh Naim Qasim, he replaced them, right? And Sheikh Naim Qasim, I'm being very honest with you, I don't see him as a charismatic. I don't see him as a strategic person. And it's just like I watched many of his speeches. He's not someone who can bring the Hezbollah people together and unite them. I'm being very honest with you. And that could be the reason why Israel didn't come after him or try to assassinate him as well, because in Israel they see that he's not in the same, he doesn't have the same mind, the same character like Nasrallah and Hisham Safieddin. This is all what I'm going to tell you about this. Now, if you want to go back a little bit back to Syria, basically, I'm going to say something like the mainstream media in these past few weeks, they have been nonstop peddling propaganda and lies about Syria by claiming that the Jews were not allowed to come to Syria and now they're free to come to Syria. This is completely bollocks. Syrian Jews and Jews from all around the world, they were able to come to Syria, receive a visa, and visit Syria. If they were Syrian Jews, they could come to Syria. There was no problem. My Jewish Syrian friends from the United States visited Syria so many times, some of them stayed in Syria. I helped personally a Syrian Jewish friend to reopen one of the Jewish cathedrals in Damascus, to clean it from inside, to restore it. And there was no problem. The problem was with the people who were Israeli. There is a big difference in Syria between a Jewish person and someone who has an Israeli passport. Because Israel was not recognized by the Syrian state as a legitimate political entity. The people who used to hold the Israeli passport couldn't visit Syria. That's the difference. But now, under Jolani, if you are an Israeli Jew, or you are even an arch Zionist supporting the genocide of the Palestinians and the ethnic cleansing and everything, it doesn't matter. You can visit Syria. That's the difference. So I would argue that this is the first step towards the normalization of relations between Syria and Israel. So if Israel, in your opinion, felt that its citizens would be in danger in Damascus, do you think that Israel would allow an Israeli journalist basically to go to Syria and to create a documentary in Syria and post his own photo while he is in Damascus smoking shisha? Do you really think that is possible? So this is one of the Israeli journalists in Damascus. His name is Itai Anrel. He's the correspondent and documentary filmmaker of UVDA Israeli TV. You see? He's in Damascus. He says, "From Damascus with love." And he's smoking a shisha. And this is happening under the watch of Jolani. And I feel horrible about this because basically, myself, as a Syrian journalist, if I go back to Syria now, I will be executed. But an Israeli journalist going to Syria and making a documentary about Syria, it's okay. This is Jolani's Syria. Keep in mind. This is the trailer, or sorry, not this one. This is the trailer, or let's see. So basically, this is the video that the Israeli journalist is going to publish. This is like a trailer. Israeli journalist Itai Anrel filmed an episode for Israel's Channel 12 while moving through Syria and its military bases. He said, "I cannot believe myself as an Israeli that I can walk around here." He showcased images of secret Syrian facilities hidden for years and stated, "Everything here is available. I can even take the warheads of the missiles." The upcoming episode of The Truth, titled "Welcome to Syria," will air, it seems, today on Channel 12. Unreal reported from the heart of Damascus, exploring abandoned Syrian military bases and Iranian command centers. Unbelievable. Take a look.
הכל פה פרוץ, אני יכול לקחת ראשי נפץ, מה שבא לי. מה פיש משקל מעפרין? זה היה הסיוט שלנו בשנים האחרונות. מצאנו דלת סודית. מטורף.
This is the Jolani Syria, guys. I will ask you one question. Since yesterday there was the funeral of the former leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, how many tons of explosives has Israel dropped on the southern suburbs of Beirut in order to assassinate Nasrallah? Do you know the answer? I'm checking the live chat, by the way. For those who don't know, Israel dropped 80 tons. Yes, 84 tons. 84 tons of explosives on Nasrallah to kill him. So the question here is, how many tons of explosives has Israel dropped in Jolani and on his forces? 0. And why is it the case? Aren't Al-Qaeda forces a danger for Israel? Shouldn't they be considered enemies for Israel? Why hasn't Israel tried to assassinate Jolani? Wasn't he the partner with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi? Wasn't he the founder of the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria? So if he seriously poses a threat to Israel, at least Israel would complain about the takeover of Damascus by basically Al-Qaeda offshoot. Or they would try to intimidate him or kill him or do something about it, right? But they did nothing. 0, nil. And what does that tell you about these geopolitical conflicts in the region? That Al-Qaeda has been and is still a contract army for the United States in the region. Those people who fight for Al-Qaeda, those fighters who think they are doing something for God, they're geopolitical useful idiots. And people like Jolani and Baghdadi, they are intelligence assets. And they're the ones who destroy the region and prepare the region for the expansion of Israel for the sake of the Greater Israel Project. I have no doubts about that. And there are so many collaborators in the region and so much hatred and against the Shias and others in the region, minorities, not by or just normal Sunni people. Those are all, in my opinion, intelligence plans. Like, I will show you one of the famous Syrian pro-Jolani activists. And this guy is, his name is Abdul Hadi Al-Aini. And he posted the basically the tomb and the graveyard of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah from yesterday. And he says, the only place in Lebanon that I wish to be hit by 4 bunker buster missiles. I truly wonder where all this hatred come from. I would tell you the truth. There is no incident of Hezbollah killing civilians in Syria, massacring them, raping them, killing basically unarmed people. There is no incident like this. This is all built and based on nothing but lies. I will go one step further and tell you, there are footage of former Syrian army under Assad committing war crimes. There are footage. You can see they have committed war crimes. I have not seen one video of a Hezbollah fighter committing a war crime in Syria. So where does this hate come from? It comes from, one, sectarian hatred, and sectarianism is the best weapon in the hands of Israel to divide and conquer the region. or these people are basically working for Israel as intelligence assets, or basically working for Qatar because they have this also contact with the 8200 unit in Israel. There is no other way of saying it. These people are harmful for their own people, the Sunnis, before the Shias, before the Alawites, before the Christians. They are the useful idiots in the hands of Israel, and they have been advancing the interests of Israel in the region. Divide and conquer, expansion of Israel. Divide and conquer, expansion of Israel, until the Greater Israel project is materialized. So if you have any doubts that Israel is capable of advancing inside Syria and expanding its borders, I think you should think twice before that. I created today 2 posts on X I just want to share with you at the end of this conversation. I hope you are enjoying this, guys. I said HDS is a CIA MIT creation. Let's not forget how countless self-proclaimed pro-Palestine activists shamelessly cheered for an American intelligence asset to seize control of Syria, driven by nothing but sectarian hatred. Now these same people are pretending they had no idea. When we sounded the alarm, you dismissed us as Assadists. The truth was right in front of you, and you chose to ignore it. And finally, and this is the saddest part of the situation in Syria, and it is being materialized in front of our eyes, I said someone has to go back to my older streams after the regime change in Syria and post the segments which I told you what is going to happen to the country. Political decentralization, Turkification of the Sunnis, Balkanization of the minorities, Israeli expansion without resistance, privatization of strategic infrastructure. You will own nothing and you will be happy. So, if you were expecting me to be optimistic, I am not. And there are people keep posting commentaries telling me, believe in the Syrian people, they will wake up one day, do this and that. I will be very happy if that happens. Do I believe it is going to happen? No, I don't believe it's going to happen in the foreseeable future. Maybe I am wrong, and I would be very happy to be wrong about this case. But at the current moment, I don't believe that is the case. If you agree with me or disagree with me, I truly encourage you to write your opinion in a respectful way. We're here to learn from each other. This podcast is, these conversations, these streams are for educational purposes. So I believe everyone who is watching Syriana Analysis has at least a certain level of political education or curious to learn and engage respectfully with each other. I truly appreciate all of you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's live streaming. If you like this content, the best thing you could do is thumbs up, hit the like button, and leave a comment. And if you want to do more, you can become a patron to support the independent journalistic work I'm doing. Patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. If you don't like to use Patreon, there are other means in the description below. You can check it. And I will see you tomorrow on the 25th of February 2025, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you guys and upon your families. See you tomorrow. Salam.